Hey everyone. Welcome to the channel. You're about to dive into something epic, so buckle up. Rocket. Today, we've got an incredible The Galactic Wars prize, humanity's empire and the universe's fear that will blow your mind. But before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on any of the exciting content coming your way. Let's jump right in. The Galactic Wars prize, humanity's empire and the universe's fear. The war that changed everything. The story begins by introducing the galaxy, a vast, interconnected network of civilizations spanning countless planets, systems, and species. Peace has reigned for centuries, but beneath the surface, tensions have been simmering between various factions. Then, out of nowhere, humans, an unknown species from a small planet in the Milky Way, entered the galactic stage. Their sudden arrival brought both awe and fear to the other species. Introduce the galaxy as a place of delicate balance, with powerful empires and peaceful alliances. Humans, initially discovered by a peaceful species, are unaware of the scale of galactic politics. When the war erupts, the humans are thrust into it not by choice, but by their own ambition and the desire to prove themselves. For centuries, the galaxy had lived under a fragile peace. It wasn't a peace born from shared ideals or mutual understanding, but one rooted in a balance of power. The Surraki Dominion, the Velari Coalition, the Iskaron Confederacy, and countless other species had established borders and treaties, their military forces poised at the edges of their territory. The galaxy was a place of complex politics, trade routes, and rivalries, yet for all its vastness, it managed to function under a tenuous truce. War had been a distant threat, looming in the background but never quite materializing. But peace, like all things, was fragile. It was the sudden appearance of a species from an insignificant planet on the outer rim of the Milky Way Earth that shattered the galactic peace. Humanity, a species previously unknown to the greater galactic community, had reached the stars. Their arrival was not as diplomats or explorers but as ambitious conquerors, fueled by their own curiosity and an insatiable thirst for knowledge and power. The first human ship to venture beyond its solar system, the Aurora, had been little more than an experimental vessel, intended to reach the closest star system. But when it encountered a long-forgotten alien race, the Arceans, the first steps of humanity into the galactic stage were set in motion. The Arceans had been one of the oldest and most advanced civilizations known in the galaxy, a race that had spent millennia mapping the stars and maintaining a neutral stance in galactic politics. They were not a military force to be reckoned with, but their knowledge was unparalleled. They had mastered technology, philosophy, and diplomacy, ensuring that they remained a valuable ally to those who desired peace. The Aurora's unexpected arrival at the Arcean system was, at first, met with curiosity. The humans, like many species before them, were eager to make contact and engage in trade and knowledge sharing. But the Arceans, having already observed the volatile history of younger species, were hesitant. They understood the potential dangers of introducing a newly advanced species into the delicate ecosystem of galactic peace. However, the humans were not interested in diplomacy at first. They viewed the encounter as an opportunity, a chance to prove themselves. They offered advanced technologies to the Arceans, not fully understanding the fragile balance that those technologies might disrupt. It wasn't long before the Arceans' caution turned to distrust. In a matter of weeks, human ships began to arrive in droves, each one seeking new systems to colonize and claim in the name of the human race. It was not long before the Surraki Dominion took notice. The Surraki Dominion, first to strike. The Surraki were a warrior species, militaristic and expansionist, with a long history of conflict and conquest. Their empire stretched across hundreds of star systems, and they had long maintained a delicate peace with the other galactic powers. To them, the sudden appearance of humanity was both a mystery and a threat. The humans had no known allies, no interstellar history, and yet they possessed technologies that were, in many ways, superior to the Surraki's own. The Surraki had seen new species before, many of them eager to claim their place among the stars. Some of these species had been welcomed into the fold, while others had been crushed under the might of the Surraki fleets. But humanity was different. They did not come with the same traditions, values, or understanding of galactic diplomacy. Worse still, they seemed uninterested in understanding the complexities of interstellar relations. They were brash, naive, and, perhaps most dangerously, hungry for power. The Surraki leadership, the High Council, convened in secret. To them, the question was no longer one of diplomacy or negotiation. It was a matter of survival. If humanity's unchecked expansion continued, it would upset the balance of power that had kept the galaxy relatively stable for eons. The decision was made swiftly: humanity had to be contained before it became a threat. But the Surraki were not yet prepared for the full scale of the war they were about to instigate. As the Surraki Dominion prepared to launch their first strikes on human colonies, the Velari Coalition, a more peaceful yet formidable alliance of species, found themselves caught in the middle. The Velari had long been a stabilizing force in the galaxy, mediating conflicts and ensuring that no one empire or faction became too dominant. They were powerful, but their influence came from their wisdom and diplomacy rather than military strength. The Velari had watched humanity's arrival with a mixture of intrigue and concern. On one hand, they recognized the potential of humans, an adaptable, resourceful species that could bring new ideas and technologies to the galaxy. But on the other hand, they saw the same dangerous ambition that the Surraki feared. The Velari were no strangers to the destructive power of unchecked expansionism. They had seen it before, in countless other species that had risen and fallen. When the first shots were fired by the Surraki, the Velari acted swiftly to intervene. Their diplomats reached out to the humans, attempting to open a line of communication and prevent an all-out war. But the humans, now emboldened by their first forays into galactic conquest, were not interested in appeasement. They had come to the stars with a clear purpose: to expand, to thrive, and to make their mark. The Velari, despite their best efforts, found themselves unable to halt the march of war. The Surraki launched their first wave of attacks, and human ships, newly equipped with advanced weapons, retaliated fiercely. The galaxy that had once been defined by delicate treaties and balance was suddenly plunged into chaos. In the early days of the war, humanity was viewed as a wild card. Their forces, although not as numerous as the Surrakis, were highly innovative and effective. The human ships utilized advanced AI-controlled fleets and specialized combat units, making them unpredictable and dangerous. The Surraki had underestimated the humans' ingenuity and their willingness to engage in unconventional tactics. At first, the war was fought at the edges of known space, in isolated star systems where human colonies had begun to establish themselves. But as the conflict spread, entire sectors of the galaxy were drawn into the chaos. The Velari, desperate to prevent total destruction, appealed to the other species to intervene. However, many of them were reluctant, unsure of which side to support. The Surraki Dominion, with its long-standing military might, seemed a safer bet for many, while others feared the unchecked expansion of humanity. The war escalated quickly, and soon entire fleets were clashing in the cold void of space. Planets were bombarded, entire colonies wiped out, and the once beautiful galaxies that had thrived in peace began to burn. For the humans, the war became an obsession. They fought not only to survive but to prove their place in the galaxy. The Surraki, relentless in their desire to crush humanity, pushed forward with brutal force, hoping to eliminate the human threat once and for all. It was during the Battle of Iskaron, a decisive conflict that took place near a massive asteroid field, that the first major human victory occurred. The battle had been anticipated for weeks, with both sides preparing massive fleets for a final showdown. The Surraki, confident in their superior numbers and military strategy, expected to overwhelm the human forces and finally break the resistance. But the humans had a secret weapon: their adaptability. Using their AI systems and superior tactical awareness, they were able to outmaneuver the Surraki forces, exploiting weaknesses in their formations and using the asteroid field as cover for surprise attacks. The Surraki were thrown into disarray, and within hours, their fleet was in full retreat. The victory at Iskaron sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The humans, once considered insignificant, had now proven themselves to be a formidable force. The Surraki, stunned by their loss, withdrew to lick their wounds, while the rest of the galaxy watched in awe and fear. For the first time in centuries, a species from a distant corner of the galaxy had disrupted the balance of power. The peace that had once held the galaxy together had shattered, and the war was now in full swing. But no one, not even the humans, could have predicted just how far the conflict would go, or how it would forever change the galaxy. The war, still in its infancy, was only just beginning. Humanity's involvement had shifted the tides of conflict in ways that no one could have imagined. The Surraki were not defeated yet, and the Velari, though shaken, were determined to broker peace. The galaxy had been thrust into an age of uncertainty, where the future was as unknown as the vastness of space itself. And somewhere, in the midst of it all, humanity stood at the precipice of an uncertain future. Would they fall back into the shadows, or would they rise to claim their place in the stars? The galaxy, now living in fear, could only watch as humans, once an insignificant species, charted a path that would forever alter the course of history. The Galactic War begins. Tensions between two major factions, the Surraki Dominion and the Velari Coalition, escalate to the point of full-scale conflict. Humans, curious and eager to explore beyond their solar system, are caught in the middle. Initially, they try to remain neutral, but their rapid technological advancements attract the attention of both factions. The Dominion sees humans as potential allies, while the Coalition believes they must be neutralized before they tip the balance. The history of the Surraki Dominion and Velari Coalition, their goals, and their conflicting ideologies. The arrival of humans to the galactic scene and their struggle to understand the enormity of the conflict. First, human involvement in the war, whether it's through diplomacy, espionage, or accidental engagement. The Battle of Iskaron had been humanity's first major victory in the Galactic War, but it was far from the end of their involvement. In fact, it marked the beginning of a new, more dangerous phase of the conflict. As the war escalated, humanity's rapid technological advancements and strategic ingenuity began to spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The war fronts multiplied, and the galaxy, once a place of cautious peace, was thrust into an era of unprecedented destruction. The Surraki Dominion, humiliated by their defeat at Iskaron, regrouped quickly. They began to retool their strategy, shifting from direct confrontation to more insidious tactics. The Surraki military, highly disciplined and ruthless, understood that they could not afford another defeat like the one at Iskaron. Yet, humanity's unexpected resilience had caught them off guard. The Dominion's leaders, a cabal of battle-hardened generals and cunning politicians, realized that the war would not be won with mere brute force. It required something more. On the other side, the Velari Coalition, once a stabilizing force in the galaxy, found themselves grappling with a difficult dilemma. While they had long advocated for diplomacy, the Surraki's violent approach and humanity's aggressive expansion left them with few options. They could not afford to be passive any longer. Their neutral stance had been eroded by the escalation of the war, and now they were caught between two titanic forces, unsure of where their loyalties truly lay. As humanity's influence expanded, the galaxy was forced to take sides. Empires that had once been content to remain neutral now found themselves drawn into the conflict, either by human expansion or by the advancing Surraki forces. Every sector of space became a potential battleground, and the war spread like wildfire. Humanity's success at Iskaron had not been a fluke. It was the result of years of preparation, technological innovation, and sheer determination. Unlike the more traditional galactic species, humanity had not relied on the slow, steady buildup of military might. Instead, they had leveraged their strengths in adaptability, innovation, and AI-driven strategies. Their early victories were propelled not just by their weapons, but by their unrelenting drive to outthink and outmaneuver their opponents. The humans quickly learned that while brute force could win battles, it was intelligence and innovation that would win the war. The creation of tactical AI units became one of their most significant advantages. Human ships, once reliant on a few skilled pilots, now operated with the aid of hyper-intelligent AI, capable of processing vast amounts of data in real time and adjusting strategies mid-battle. This fusion of human ingenuity and artificial intelligence allowed them to execute complex maneuvers that left their enemies baffled. But it was not only their AI-driven tactics that made humanity formidable. Their engineering advancements in shielding technology and energy weapons set them apart. The human fleet boasted hyper-efficient energy shields, able to absorb and deflect attacks far more efficiently than their adversaries. Their weapons, too, were devastatingly effective, especially their quantum disruptors, which could bypass conventional shielding and damage even the most advanced enemy vessels. Despite their newfound power, humanity's greatest asset was their spirit. They fought not just for survival, but for a belief and idea that they were meant to be more than they had ever been on Earth. The human soldiers, though vastly outnumbered, were fiercely motivated, willing to fight to the bitter end. The war was personal for them. They fought not just for territory or resources, but for their place in the galaxy. And that made them dangerous. After Iskaron, the conflict between humanity and the Surraki grew in scale and complexity. The once isolated skirmishes now stretched across multiple star systems. What had been a localized war on the fringes of known space was rapidly turning into a galaxy-wide struggle. The Surraki Dominion, recognizing the growing threat posed by humanity's innovative tactics, expanded their military efforts. They began launching shock campaigns, swift and brutal attacks on human-controlled systems, aiming to crush any resistance before it could take root. Humanity's expansionist nature, meanwhile, led them to take the offensive. Their forces, emboldened by the victory at Iskaron, pushed into previously neutral territories, aggressively establishing colonies and fortifying planets. With each new conquest, they tested their newfound power, and the galaxy watched in fear as human ships spread their reach ever farther. The Outer Rim, once a remote and lawless sector of the galaxy, became the first major battleground. This sector had been home to a number of small, relatively peaceful species who had managed to avoid the larger conflicts of galactic politics. These species now found themselves caught in the crossfire, their worlds and resources exploited by both the Surraki and the humans. What was once a diverse and peaceful region became a war-torn wasteland, with entire planets reduced to rubble in the wake of the conflict. The Ziffaran Enclave, a race of technologically advanced beings known for their pacifistic philosophy, found themselves reluctantly drawn into the war. The Ziffarans had long been a neutral force, mediating between conflicting species and preserving fragile peace treaties. But the Surraki, eager to establish dominance, began to encroach on Ziffaran space. Faced with the prospect of destruction or compliance, the Ziffarans reluctantly aligned themselves with the Velari coalition, hoping that an alliance with the established powers might offer some protection. Humanity, meanwhile, found itself on the offensive in this sector as well. They had made their mark in the Outer Rim, but they were not content with mere expansion. The war was no longer just about establishing territory, it had become a struggle for total dominance. The humans began constructing fortified star bases, heavily armed stations in key systems, which served both as military outposts and symbols of their growing power. These star bases, heavily shielded and bristling with weapons, became strategic assets. They were able to hold entire sectors of space, forcing the Surraki to divert resources to counter them. The human military planners understood that their star bases were not just defensive structures, they were an extension of their power, a statement to the galaxy that humanity had arrived. As the war fronts expanded, not all species were content to sit on the sidelines. The Arceans, The ancient and highly intellectual race who had once welcomed humanity with cautious optimism, became the first to openly resist human expansion. Though they had no desire for war, they could not ignore the growing threat that humanity's unchecked ambition posed to the galactic order. The Arceans formed the Galactic Peace Coalition, a loose alliance of species dedicated to restoring balance and halting human aggression. The Galactic Peace Coalition sought to contain humanity through diplomacy, offering peace talks and negotiations. But the humans, now firmly entrenched in their belief that they had earned their place among the stars, rejected these overtures. To them, the coalition was nothing more than a group of weakened species trying to hold them back. They saw their military strength as an expression of their rightful place in the galaxy, and they were unwilling to back down. In the Outer Rim, the Sundari nomads, a mercenary group with deep ties to the Surraki, began raiding human colonies. These nomads, once a scattered group of spacefaring traders, had been militarized by the Surraki, who saw them as useful tools in their struggle against the humans. The Sundari launched covert operations to sabotage human supply lines and disrupt their expansion, drawing humanity into a guerrilla war that would stretch their forces thin. Meanwhile, the Velari coalition, though reluctant to fight, found themselves drawn deeper into the conflict. The Velari, once staunch advocates for peace, now realized that their neutral stance was no longer feasible. If humanity's expansion continued unchecked, the entire galactic order might collapse. They began fortifying their borders and providing support to those species resisting human domination, though they still hoped to avoid full-scale conflict. The galaxy was now a battlefield, with the conflict rapidly spreading beyond the original players. Humanity's aggressive expansion and technological superiority had forced every species to either choose a side or face annihilation. As the battlefronts expanded, the true cost of the war began to reveal itself. The once thriving galactic trade routes were disrupted, leaving entire star systems without the resources they needed to survive. Famine and disease spread in the wake of the conflict, with civilian populations caught between the warring factions. Planets that had been rich in resources were looted, their once advanced societies reduced to ruins. The economic and environmental toll on the galaxy was incalculable. The humans, despite their initial victories, began to feel the strain of prolonged conflict. The loss of life, both military and civilian, weighed heavily on their leadership. Morale began to falter as soldiers and civilians alike questioned the price of their expansion. Though they had once been united by their ambition, cracks were beginning to show. The war was no longer just about conquering space, it was about survival. But for every human that grew weary, there were those who believed more fiercely than ever in their cause. The Reclaimers, a radical faction within the human military, began to rise in prominence. Led by a charismatic and ruthless general, the Reclaimers believed that humanity's destiny was not to merely survive but to dominate. They called for an escalation of the war, total victory at any cost. By the time the human fleet had spread across the galaxy, the war had become a cosmic behemoth. The galaxy's once delicate peace had disintegrated into a series of bloody conflicts, each one feeding into the next. The Surraki, now forced into a war of attrition, had adapted to human tactics but struggled to overcome their adversaries. The Velari coalition, once the shining example of diplomacy, had become embroiled in a conflict that threatened to consume them all. And humanity, for all their victories, was learning that the price of war was greater than they had ever anticipated. The battlefronts expanded, but so did the consequences. The galaxy that had once known a fragile peace now stood on the edge of destruction, unsure whether it would be reborn or erased forever. As the war intensifies, humans begin to pick sides, initially unaware of the long-lasting consequences of their actions. Their technology, particularly advanced AI and new weaponry, plays a significant role in shifting the tide of the conflict. But with every victory, the consequences grow more dire. Entire civilizations are wiped out in the name of strategy, and the fragile peace once shared by the galaxy begins to crumble. Show the brutal realities of war as the humans witness the devastation caused by their involvement. Introduce new alien species, some of whom try to warn humans about the impending chaos, while others are already swept up in the madness. A pivotal battle where humans play a crucial role in deciding the outcome, but it costs them their humanity in some way. The war had become an unstoppable force, and with each passing day, the galaxy seemed to inch closer to an irreversible point of no return. The once vibrant sectors of space that had been centers of trade, culture, and scientific exchange were now transformed into battlegrounds. Planets that once flourished with life and prosperity now lay in ruins, their populations decimated or scattered. The very fabric of galactic society was being torn apart by the relentless conflict. For humanity, the war was not just a fight for survival or expansion. It was, in many ways, a fight for identity. They had reached the stars and sought to claim their place among the great powers of the galaxy, but at what cost? In the pursuit of progress, the price of war was beginning to weigh heavily on their shoulders, and questions began to arise: was this truly the destiny they had envisioned, or were they spiraling toward a path of destruction? The war had initially unified humanity. The early victories over the Surraki and other galactic powers created a sense of national pride and ambition. The humans believed that their advancement, fueled by their relentless drive to explore, conquer, and innovate, was a noble pursuit. Their technological innovations, particularly in military AI and spacefaring technology, were seen as evidence of their superiority. However, as the war stretched on, cracks began to form in this unified front. The human leadership, once certain of their moral high ground, now found themselves grappling with the consequences of their actions. The initial idealism that had motivated humanity's expansion was replaced by the harsh realities of total war. The ethics of their conquest began to be questioned, not only by their enemies but by their own people. The Unity Council, the governing body of humanity, found itself divided. On one side were the expansionists, a faction that still believed in humanity's manifest destiny to dominate the galaxy. They argued that the war was necessary to secure humanity's place as a dominant power, to ensure that their species would not be lost in the chaos of galactic conflict. To them, the cost of war was justified by the promise of a future in which humanity ruled, where their values and vision could shape the galaxy. On the other side were the pacifists, a growing faction within humanity that was beginning to question the morality of the war. The devastating toll on human civilians, the destruction of entire planets, and the increasing loss of life weighed heavily on their consciences. They began to see the war not as a path to glory, but as a deadly spiral into self-destruction. The pacifists called for a cessation of hostilities, hoping that diplomacy and peace could still be achieved. They argued that humanity had been blinded by their ambition, unable to see that their relentless pursuit of power was eroding the very foundations of their society. This internal struggle created a deep divide in humanity's ranks. Soldiers began to question their commanders' orders, and civilians voiced their concerns through protests and demonstrations. The idea of progress, once so clear and unyielding, was now marred by doubt. Was this truly the future humanity had dreamed of? Or were they on the brink of losing everything they had fought for? The front lines of war were not confined to the distant reaches of space or the military bases that dotted the galaxy. The war's impact was felt everywhere, even on the home front. As the conflict expanded, the once thriving human colonies that had been established across the stars were now targets of Surraki raids, bombardments, and blockades. Civilian casualties were mounting at an alarming rate. Entire cities on human-controlled planets were wiped off the map as the Surraki launched brutal attacks. The human military, already stretched thin, struggled to protect these vulnerable civilian populations. The horrors of war were not just felt by soldiers, entire families found themselves living in fear, hiding underground or fleeing to distant colonies in search of safety. In response to the growing losses, the Unity Council implemented harsh measures to keep the war effort alive. Conscription was expanded, with more and more civilians forced to join the military or contribute to war production. The elderly, the young, and those with medical conditions were conscripted into the workforce, making weapons, armor, and supplies. Entire populations were mobilized for war, regardless of their age or status. Every able-bodied person was expected to contribute, and those who resisted were branded as traitors or cowards. The war effort consumed everything. Resources were drained from every corner of humanity's territories to fuel the war machine. Food, medicine, and essential goods were rationed, and the resulting shortages led to widespread starvation and suffering. The once proud human colonies, with their bustling cities and thriving economies, had been reduced to makeshift fortresses, their citizens scrambling to survive as war tore through their world. On the battlefield, human soldiers began to show signs of war fatigue. The stress of prolonged combat, the loss of comrades, and the unrelenting pressure to succeed were taking their toll. The once optimistic soldiers who had first joined the military with a sense of duty and purpose were now jaded and disillusioned. They fought not for glory or honor, but simply to survive. The human military had evolved into a vast and faceless machine, grinding down the spirits of those who manned it. The mental and emotional toll of war had become as destructive as the physical toll. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and other psychological scars became rampant within the ranks, but there was little time or support for recovery. The war, it seemed, demanded everything from humanity, and there was little left to give. The relentless expansion of the warfronts came at a staggering environmental cost. Planets that were once lush and resource-rich were now devastated by bombardments and resource extraction. Entire ecosystems were wiped out as both humanity and the Surraki fought over the wealth of the galaxy. The destruction of planets was not a rare occurrence, it became a routine aspect of war, a necessary sacrifice in the pursuit of victory. The Desolation Fields, a region of space once known for its natural beauty, became the site of some of the most violent clashes between humanity and the Surraki. The once pristine planets in the region were now barren, their surfaces scarred by the destructive weapons unleashed during battles. Once thriving cities were now ruins, and the delicate balance of life that had existed for eons was shattered beyond repair. Economically, the war had a similar effect. The galactic trade routes, which had once been the lifeblood of many species, were now effectively shut down. The destruction of spaceports, the plundering of valuable resources, and the constant threat of attack had crippled the flow of goods and services. The galaxy's once prosperous markets were now in chaos, and many species that had relied on trade for survival were now facing economic collapse. Humanity, too, was feeling the strain. The cost of the war effort financially and resource-wise was astronomical. Entire industries had been repurposed for military production, and the civilian economy had been left in shambles. The Unified Council had poured everything into the war effort, but with each victory, they found themselves further and further from the prosperity they had once dreamed of. The promise of progress, once so clear, now seemed like a distant memory. As the war continued, questions about the long-term sustainability of humanity's expansion began to surface. Could they afford to continue the war indefinitely? Were they sacrificing too much in the name of progress? Humanity's technological advancements, once seen as a beacon of hope and a symbol of their potential, had now become instruments of destruction. The AI-controlled warships and advanced energy weapons that had once been admired for their ingenuity were now viewed with a mixture of awe and horror. The efficiency with which these technologies could wipe out entire fleets or obliterate planets was both impressive and terrifying. In particular, the human use of quantum disruptors devices capable of bypassing most conventional shields and disintegrating enemy vessels had become one of the most feared weapons in the galaxy. While these weapons gave humanity a distinct advantage in battle, they also carried a heavy moral price. The devastating power of these weapons was indiscriminate. Once fired, they left little behind, just charred husks of ships and entire systems left in ruin. It was impossible to ignore the ethical implications of wielding such destructive power. Humanity's increasing reliance on autonomous drones and robotic armies also raised moral concerns. These machines, once seen as tools of efficiency, were now responsible for large-scale slaughter. The question arose, were the humans truly fighting the war, or were they simply directing machines to carry out their will? The lines between soldier and machine were becoming increasingly blurred, and many began to question the cost of technological advancement in a conflict where humanity's very soul seemed to be at stake. As the war raged on, humanity's leadership began to ask themselves the hardest question of all: what would be the legacy of this conflict? Would they be remembered as the species that united the galaxy under one banner of progress and peace, or as the destroyers who consumed everything in their wake? The Unity Council was divided. The expansionists, who believed in humanity's right to shape the future, saw the war as a necessary step toward a new galactic order. They believed that humanity's destiny was to rule, to bring the galaxy into a new age of peace and prosperity under their leadership. In their eyes, the cost of progress was justified. But the pacifists and many others within humanity's ranks were beginning to despair. The once bright vision of a united human race exploring the stars was now tarnished by the brutal realities of war. They wondered if humanity's future had been irrevocably altered by their unchecked ambitions. Had they gone too far? And if they had, could they ever return to a path of peace? The question loomed over every decision, every battle, and every moment of the war: what kind of galaxy would they leave behind? As the war raged on, humanity was forced to confront the full cost of their progress. The galaxy, once a vast expanse of untapped potential, had become a battleground for the future of all life. The ideal of peace and prosperity that had once driven humanity to the stars was now overshadowed by the relentless pursuit of power and survival. Humanity's legacy, once uncertain, was now inextricably linked to the war they had started. The galaxy trembled under the weight of their ambition, and the cost of progress became clearer with every passing day. The war had become not just a fight for survival, but a fight for identity, a fight for the soul of humanity itself. The war reaches its peak, and the consequences of human involvement become fully apparent. The once thriving galaxy is now in ruin. The human race, now deeply integrated into the galactic war, begins to question its place in this conflict. Was it worth it? Can peace ever be restored? Some factions want to continue the fight, while others see a bleak future and yearn for peace. The emergence of a new, deadly weapon threatens to annihilate all life in the galaxy. The rise of a new, formidable weapon or faction that is capable of destroying entire star systems. A turning point where some humans try to broker peace, while others become entrenched in their desire for power and control. Tensions between human factions, those who wish for peace and those who still want to fight. The war ends, but at a great cost. The weapons developed by humans and their enemies have left vast swaths of space barren. Entire species have been wiped out or driven into hiding. The galaxy is fractured, and the once glorious civilizations that existed are now mere shadows of themselves. Even those who survived live in fear of the humans' continued presence and their terrifying weapons. The rest of the universe now watches the humans with a mixture of fear and admiration, unsure of what they will do next. The aftermath of the war planets are left in ruin, and there's widespread distrust of human intentions. Human leaders wrestle with the guilt of their species' role in the destruction of galactic peace. Introduce a new faction or alliance formed by surviving species to keep a check on human power. The universe was no longer the same. After the catastrophic war that humans had unleashed upon the galaxy, the very fabric of galactic society was torn and stained. What had once been a bustling, harmonious collection of worlds and civilizations, united under a fragile but enduring peace, had now become a divided, fear-stricken cosmos. For decades, the humans had been the catalyst that set the galaxy ablaze, and now their presence loomed over the universe like a dark cloud. In the aftermath, the idea of a new order had taken root not in the sense of hope or reconstruction, but rather a desperate and wary arrangement born from the understanding that the galaxy could never return to what it once was. The Great War had left scars that ran deep, both in the physical realms of destroyed planets and star systems, as well as in the psyche of every species across the galaxy. The humans, once an insignificant species from a small, distant planet in the Milky Way, now sat at the center of an uneasy balance of power. The fear of the unknown. Years had passed since the final ceasefire, the official end of the war that had altered the course of history. But the peace that followed was one of uneasy silence. It was a peace born not of trust or shared values, but of sheer, unspoken fear. The humans, though technically the victors, had not emerged unscathed. The cost of their involvement had taken a toll on their own people, millions of lives lost in battles far from home, entire cities devastated by weapons of mass destruction, and a deep moral scar that many human leaders now carried with them. Yet, amidst the wreckage, they were still the most powerful force in the galaxy. Human society, having learned the hard way the consequences of unrestrained ambition, had become more cautious, more introspective. The leaders of Earth and the colonies that followed their pioneers were determined not to repeat the mistakes of the past. Their once unshakable belief in their superiority had been shattered, but they still held the mightiest fleets, the most advanced technology, and the potential to reignite the flames of war at a moment's notice. The galaxy had long been aware of human unpredictability. The humans were quick to act, swift to evolve, and dangerously ambitious. No one trusted that they would remain passive forever. Now, the rest of the galactic powers watched them from the periphery, eyes always trained on the human fleets that patrolled the stars, always wondering if the next war would be started by them. The Galactic Council. In an effort to contain the humans' power and prevent another devastating war, the surviving factions of the old galactic order had formed a new institution, the Galactic Council. Comprised of representatives from the major species that had survived the war, the Council was both a diplomatic body and a defensive alliance. Its goal was simple: monitor and regulate human activity, ensuring that the species did not return to its violent ways. The Council's headquarters, once located on a neutral planet of great cultural significance, was now a place of suspicion and tension. Each session was guarded by fleets of ships from all corners of the galaxy, and representatives were always accompanied by an entourage of guards. The building, once a symbol of collaboration, now felt like a prison, a cage meant to keep the humans in check. At the heart of the council was Chancellor Iskaron of the Velari Coalition, one of the few surviving leaders from the old regime. His once strong voice now carried the weight of an entire galaxy's distrust. Iskaron was a seasoned diplomat, yet even he found it difficult to contain his anxiety when addressing the human representatives. The Velari, the race that had suffered the most in the war, had been reduced to a fraction of their former glory. Their homeworld had been shattered by human-led campaigns, and they had learned not to forgive so easily. In contrast, the humans that sat on the council were not the impetuous, youthful diplomats of old, but rather hardened veterans of war, scarred both physically and emotionally. The human delegation was led by Chancellor Sarah Wilkins, a woman whose eyes betrayed a deep sorrow for the destruction caused by her people, yet her voice carried the same quiet strength that had led humanity through the war. The meetings between the council members were tense, their discussions conducted with formal words and veiled threats. There was no open hostility, but the fear was palpable. The humans held a delicate balance of power, and every conversation seemed like a negotiation for the very future of the galaxy. The threat of human technology. The crux of the matter, however, was not just the humans' presence in the galaxy, it was their technology. The war had introduced weapons of unimaginable power to the galaxy. The humans had developed technologies that outstripped anything the galactic powers had seen. Some of these technologies were ancient relics, fragments from forgotten civilizations buried deep in the human archives. Others had been born from desperation, crafted by human minds under the duress of conflict. The most feared of these innovations was the Void Engine, a weapon capable of collapsing entire star systems. It was a last-ditch creation, meant to serve as a deterrent against the complete annihilation of humanity. But in the wrong hands, it could obliterate life on an unimaginable scale. The galaxy had seen a taste of its power during the war, when humanity used a smaller version of the device to neutralize the forces of the Surraki Dominion in the final hours of battle. The Void engine was now locked away in a human-controlled facility, heavily guarded and never to be used again, or so the humans claimed. Still, rumors swirled throughout the galaxy about the weapon's true capabilities, and many believed that the human leaders had only pretended to retire it. Even with the weapon's destructive potential rendered inactive, the galaxy's fear of human technology persisted. The humans had a knack for finding new solutions to impossible problems, and as long as they held that edge, they remained a threat, one that no species could ignore. The divide among humans. Not all humans, however, were content with the status quo. While many were determined to rebuild and honor the memory of those who had fallen in the war, others saw the fragile peace as a stifling of human potential. These radicals, who called themselves the Reclaimers, sought to expand humanity's influence across the galaxy once more. The Reclaimers were a network of underground factions, rogue military units, and disillusioned political figures. Their ranks included former war heroes, embittered soldiers, and tech-savvy engineers who believed that humanity was meant to dominate the galaxy. To them, the war had only been the first step in a much larger plan, to remake the galaxy in humanity's image. They had already begun to enact covert operations on the fringes of known space, undermining the Galactic Council and sowing seeds of unrest. The Reclaimer saw the Council as a prison, one that bound humanity to a future of mediocrity and isolation. They plotted to liberate humanity from these restrictions, to break free from the chains of the past and reclaim the power that was rightfully theirs. There were whispers of secret arms caches, rogue fleets gathering in the dark, and covert alliances forming with disillusioned factions from across the galaxy. The Galactic Council was well aware of the Reclaimers, but they were too divided to act effectively. Some argued for diplomatic engagement, offering the humans a path back to their former glory without bloodshed. Others, especially the Velari, called for an outright extermination of the rogue elements. Destroy the seed before it grows, they said. But the truth was that no one knew how far the Reclaimers' influence had spread, and the Council was powerless to stop them. A precarious peace. Back on Earth, the public was divided. There were those who had experienced the horrors of the war and who believed that humanity must never return to the path of conquest. They had seen the destruction, the lives lost, and the irreparable damage done to the galaxy. They spoke of rebuilding, of atoning for past sins. But their voices were drowned out by the powerful corporations and military figures who still held sway. The military-industrial complex had learned to thrive in the post-war economy. With the end of hostilities, a new era of profit had emerged. Weapon manufacturers, shipbuilders, and AI developers had all turned their attention to creating new technologies, not for war, but for control. There were whispers that some factions within Earth's ruling class were already preparing for the next conflict, waiting for the right moment to assert humanity's dominance once again. The galaxy watched, holding its breath. The new order had not brought the peace they had hoped for. It was merely a ceasefire, one that could unravel at any moment. The fear of humanity's power, both its potential for destruction and its ability to unite under a common cause, made the universe a more dangerous place. Years after the war, humans have now become a dominant power in the galaxy, but their legacy is one of fear. Their technologies, once revered, are now seen as dangerous. A fragile peace exists, but only through fear. New alliances are formed, but old wounds still linger. The universe's inhabitants are constantly on edge, knowing that humans have the power to change everything once again. The fear that the humans might return to the war or take further action against other civilizations. Exploration of how human society has evolved post-war. Are they now peacekeepers, or have they become even more ruthless? The possibility of a new galactic conflict, but this time with a united front of species trying to contain human power. The future of the universe. The story ends with a question hanging in the air: will the galaxy ever truly recover? The final scene might show a new, mysterious threat emerging, one that could either bring the galaxy together or force it into another war, with humans caught in the middle once again. The cycle of fear and conflict seems never-ending, and the future of the universe remains uncertain. A final message about the cyclical nature of power and fear in the universe. A suggestion that the story of the humans and their role in the galactic war might not be over after all. This structure provides a strong narrative arc with plenty of room to develop characters, political intrigue, and moral dilemmas. You can flesh out the details, focusing on specific battles, character perspectives, and how humans interact with the larger galactic community. As you develop the story, explore themes like power, responsibility, the impact of war, and the fragility of peace. If you're loving what you're watching and want to see even more exciting videos on Voidverse Chronicles, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Movie camera bell.